that time of the expansion cycle where gaming news sites and commenters alike take offhand remarks wildly out of context with a dabble of translation hijinks in exchange for an overflowing sack of clicks. And this time in the centre of debate within the FF14 world is this interview that Naoki Yoshida had with Korean media, in which he discussed the evolving design philosophy for their live service game and what their goals are going forward. Here are some of the most interesting snippets translated for you, with the big old disclaimer that it might not be 100% perfectly accurate. I don't speak Japanese or Korean. Final Fantasy XIV is now moving forward into its next decade. We have a fan festival planned and we have some pretty big announcements lined up. With the determination to embark on a second iteration, we're rethinking everything from scratch to evolve the game with new goals. In the past, MMORPGs were built around repetitive tasks, known as grinding, and time-consuming gameplay. However, things have changed since World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV as well. To put it bluntly, even 450 Allagan tomestones might not be particularly meaningful for those who don't care about item level. Therefore, we could consider exchanging them for mounts, attractive gear, and other items. I believe these things, which have been taken for granted until now, can be taken to a higher level in online game services and entertainment, and that's why I'm currently considering this direction. MMORPGs are a genre that requires a lot of time, so I don't think they're well suited for today's times. Many pioneers have already played for a long time, and catching up requires a significant investment of time, which is difficult. I don't think it's acceptable to not experience the joy of a game unless you invest hundreds of hours. Of course, the direct result of this interview has been an outpouring of people saying that they are going to do A Realm Reborn all over again. The game is getting remade from the ground up. Everything is going to change. Every minor or major gripe you have ever had at any point in time is going to be magically fixed. Of course, that is not happening. Rebooting the game from the ground up would be a diabolical waste of resources and is utterly unnecessary, despite what social media would have you believe. But I think a far more interesting discussion is one about what Yoshida does mean by this. It's in part marketing spiel, yes, and it can be taken with several grains of salt, but we can't completely dismiss what he's saying when phrases like, "We're rethinking everything from scratch. Things have been taken for granted," and "I don't think it's acceptable in regards to the cost of investment in the game." There's clearly something behind those words. FF14 1.0 was rebuilt in the first place because the game wasn't fit for the current market of the 2010s. It was a hulking old mess of early 2000 pre-World of Warcraft style design philosophy, so it makes sense that current FF14, a game that hasn't seen any structural growth since the 2010s, is in a spot where it really needs reconsideration at a much higher level than the team have given it for the past 3 expansions. Firstly, that final paragraph is bar none the largest issue FF14 is played with, regardless of which player niche you prefer or your personal feelings. I cannot recommend this game to friends, despite it being one of my favourite games ever. That is absolutely wild. Yes, it has a fun story, but it's a slow burn that can take hundreds of hours to reach any real crescendo that hooks a player. I can't invite them to come and do raids or trials with me, because they have to slog through the story and leveling experience to do so, which, again, takes hundreds of hours. The amount of barriers in place preventing people from reaching the end are so numerous and tall that I can't possibly blame someone for giving it a fair shot and dropping out. You might argue that it's an MMO and of course the leveling experience will be long, or it's a story game so they should be expected to play the entire story before doing anything else. To both of those people, I'm sorry, but whilst both of you are technically right, you're also wrong. You're missing the forest for the trees. It is a story game, and it is a game about these raids, and one centered on socializing, and a chill gathering game, and a casual party game. It's all those things and more, and players should be able to indulge in any or all of those parts as they wish. It is a choice-driven theme park MMO, and yet new players do not get that experience at all. They should. though the path to implementing that into the game isn't easy. You could try and follow the example of Guild Wars 2 and make all main story optional, providing alternate methods to level at a faster pace and allowing newcomers to dabble as they wish. You could provide alternative start points for an expedited MSQ experience, which comes with its own drawbacks. Yoshida hits the nail on the head that MMOs are an antiquated genre in general, traditionally, and that bringing its systems up to present day requires thoughtful and bold decisions from the development team. It's hard because you need to placate the current players whilst also working to improve the onboarding experience so that new people keep coming. He also specifically mentions the 450 Allegan tombstone cap, stating that they aren't meaningful for players that don't care about eye level, and that they might open their reward structures up to things like mounts to entice players to engage with the systems. I agree with this, but I would argue he isn't going far enough. The game's tombstone cap and its gearing system are both antiquated and uninteresting in general, and neither respects the player's time nor interfaces with the armory system, which is a core part of FF14's marketing spiel. It doesn't interface with it in a positive way whatsoever. Why have the pathways to best in slot barely changed at all in a decade despite so much new content being added? Why is the tombstone cap still so low despite there being 21 battle jobs now to share in it? Why is gearing alt roles so horrifically time-gated, and why does it all barely get any better even when the odd-numbered quote-unquote catch-up patch comes along? Gearing should have multiple pathways, and secondary roles should be expedited to encourage the system to be used more. What do I expect Yoshida is alluding to in this case specifically though? Well, it could be a few things. Likely it's a mixture of things. Firstly, I think the current patch release cycle is being looked at through a very critical lens. We've seen strides in this direction over the expansions even, as patches shifted from releasing almost every piece of content all at once on a single day to more piecemeal incremental updates, spreading the releases to 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4 dates across a patch, and putting out 1 or 2 pieces of content each time. A lot of modern live service games follow this pattern as well. They'll have regular updates on a monthly or bi-monthly cadence, with events filling the gap between them, and the goal being that if you log in semi-regularly, like once a week or so, there will always be something new and shiny to catch your interest. For FF14, that might mean shifting away a little bit more from the tried and tested 2 hours of story, 1 dungeon, 1 Unreal, 1 X, Y, and Z with a patch, depending on if it's an odd patch or an even patch, and testing a different release cadence. It might even mean experimenting with different types of content or creating new ones. There's a possibility it could result in changing the way weekly lockouts are handled in general, though if I'm being honest, bringing these features in line with live service games right now gives me more concern than hope, if not handled very carefully. As an example, currently FF14 has 2 features that were implemented over the past handful of years, alluding to growth in this direction. The first is the PvP Season Pass, which provides FOMO loot in the form of glamour, minions, mounts, and more in exchange for participating in the game mode a certain amount across a patch. And the other is the Mogtome event book, with tasks on a weekly and seasonal basis to dish out extra currency for participating. Both of these systems prey on FOMO, and both incentivize regular logins even during that seasonal overarching goal. I could see there being a world where we get a more overarching PvE patchly season pass with similar rewards, with additional special objectives a la Mogtome event to give particular boosts to certain parts. I've long been a stout believer that the PvP Season Pass should never leave, and that you should always be able to access a catalogue of previous passes at will and work on whichever one takes your fancy, especially considering this is a paid sub-based game, and I feel negatively about content leaving for all intents and purposes. If this system were expanded, I'd feel even more strongly that this is a necessity to keep it from feeling too predatory. It's an odd one because I don't mind the concept of having reward tracks in theory, but I don't like that they leave after a period of time, considering that you are paying for both the game and the subscription. More than this, we might see the difficulty tiers that have long stood begin to blend a little more seamlessly with the advent of quantum scaling as it potentially expands. Yoshida has stated that patch 7.3's final verse Quantum was an experiment, and also that their goal in the future is to ensure that whilst they can't just magically produce more content, they can make it a target to make sure that the content that does release can be enjoyed by more people. These 2 points, at least in regards to battle content, clearly tie into one another, and assuming that experiment is a success, we could see that quantum scaling apply to more different things, to dungeons, to trials, and even more than that. If they can find a way to keep players interested and keep them feeling adequately rewarded for their time, it could well be a winner. I still remember all the way back in the lead up to Dawntrail actually, during that PR stint including the media tours, that Yoshida was specifically asked what the plan is for jobs after level 100. Will 8.0 bring level 110? What's the plan there? In which he would cryptically reply that whilst there will be more progression for jobs and characters in the 8.0 expansion, it may take a different form than just another 10 levels. Take this with a huge grain of salt because this could just be PR bullshit and we just get level 110 anyway, seeing as it was said years ago. But if this does end up to be a statement that we could take at face value, that is interesting as well. Whilst I hope we don't get really boring skill or talent trees that end up being mostly ignored 1 week into the expansion, I do think it's possible that Square Enix can use a post-level 100 world to springboard a more interesting endgame progression system to augment gearing. Whether they use it to jumpstart more interesting stat management, or implement some kind of choice-driven mastery system that affects more than just combat capabilities of particular jobs, who knows? I would love to see a direction taken that strays away from the current status quo. I'm not sure I can take another expansion of 1 GCD upgrade, a couple of traits that make attacks do slightly more damage, 1 new OGCD you use every 2 minutes, and if you're really lucky, a skill that is just a combo action off of a currently existing ability. It's too formulaic, it's boring, and so many jobs are approaching critical mass for mindless gameplay as it is. Speaking of jobs actually, I'm somewhere between copium and hopium on serious reconsideration in regards to job design. I don't like the way a lot of jobs are designed in this game anymore because, quite simply, their priorities are almost all the same nowadays. Decision making has been culled in favour of streamlining, and whilst that comes with its upsides, there are downsides too. I'm not going to get into a big job design debate in this video, but I'm still very much in favour of new skills being added as situational, choice-based abilities rather than just mindless cooldowns that you'll press the moment they're up. Upkeep abilities, or those that require consideration before clicking them, as they'll be either a damage gain or a buff in some cases, but if used poorly, can back the user into a corner. Considering these will be learnt so close to endgame, it's fair to assume that the player is capable of keeping up with them and using them correctly most of the time. The training wheels have to come off at some point. We've long heard the back and forth debates about homogenization, job difficulty, and roles like healer, tank, and physical range DPS losing a unique sense of identity. I think it's an impossibility to expect any kind of real fix to all of this at once in 8.0. But what I do hope is that the bleeding is stopped. Positive progress is made, whether that's in the form of interesting new skills or a single role being given very close attention and a really positive shift, I don't know yet. This is another aspect Yoshida has heavily alluded to in multiple interviews, and for me, it's the one I would very much like to see. Job design has knock-on effects on every piece of combat gameplay, and for me at least, Endwalker and Dawntrail job design has been the #1 factor in my lacking interest in running lower difficulty content. If the fights are easy and the jobs aren't interesting, it's not for me. As an aside, rework the leveling experience for jobs, I beg of you. Half of them feel horrible at low levels, and some don't even make sense and have you actively learning counterintuitive to good play until you unlock skills that allow you to play the game properly later on. Just sit down and weed these out, push important abilities to earlier in the learning curve, and fill out that experience nicely. What I don't think will be the case though is the concept of FF14 getting a major code overhaul. This is something that I believe is slowly happening on the back end, patch on patch over time. With every new patch nowadays, you hear rumblings that something on Square Enix's back end has changed, which requires those third-party rapscallions to change things on their end as well. A major code overhaul would take time away from delivering new content or gameplay structure changes, and right now, the latter is the medium in which the game needs to excel even better than before to grow trust in these bold interview statements. Really, what I hope for more than anything is that we see these sentiments become reality next expansion, that Yoshida isn't just waffling this time, that Square Enix takes a swing, and whether it's a hit or a miss matters less to me than the fact it'll result in something entirely new for the game. New is good, it's fresh, and hopefully it'll be super fun. Seeing as we're reaching the tail end of Dawntrail, it's time to look to the future, and for me personally, I'm looking forward to seeing what they're cooking. Please do consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube member like these fine folk. Have a good rest of your day.